Hi, everyone. Good morning on this April 1st. Thank you for joining us this morning. We know life is hectic and busy right now, and we appreciate you coming on with us. Um, Today, we have Kristin Carpenter with us. She's the CEO and founder of Verde Brand Communications, and she's the host of the Channel Mastery podcast. We really appreciate her being with us this morning, and we know we're going to learn a lot. So, Kristin, go ahead. Thank you.
I couldn't be more happy to be here today. And literally just please consider me and my entire company at Verde at your service, and also the Channel Mastery podcast. The reason we created that is for specialty businesses, both brands and retailers across our focal markets, which include bike, outdoor, snow sports, beer, wine and spirits, consumer electronics and pet. So all of the places in our lives that really mark the happiest times in our lives, the passion industries, we're here to help. And I do believe that, independent bicycle dealers and specialty brands are kind of special snowflakes. And we have a lot of important attributes in who we are in our DNA that are really going to enable us to shine in how we communicate during this crisis. So I'm super happy to be here to help everybody. And what I'm going to do is present a framework to you and then save time for questions. And just know that if we don't get to your question today, I will make time to answer it either in email form or potentially in a Facebook Live later in the week today, or not today, but probably later in the week. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that if we don't get to your question, I will make time to answer it. It's super important right now. Okay, with that, I wanted to actually just give a quick bit of background just in case some of you aren't familiar with Verde or me, but I've been in these markets for, gosh, I think it's almost 30 years. So over 10 years as a journalist and 19 years as the founder and CEO of Verde Brand Communications. So I founded the company here in Durango, Colorado, where I moved in 1994 because I just fell in love with mountain biking. Wanted to be here at the epicenter of it with Julie Furtado and Travis and Ned Overend and all of the players who were here. Yeti Cycles was one of the reasons I moved here. I was just completely in love with that entire world. And I moved here and told my dad it was only going to be for a year, and I ended up never leaving. So I was fortunate enough to work hard and build a business from here. And Verde now has offices in Jackson Hole, Boulder. We have a small satellite office in Bend that we're hoping to expand, and obviously our founding office here in Durango. And then I have some Lone Eagles out on the East Coast as well. So we are also, we're helping our brands through this tumultuous time. And again, I've listed out the categories of specialty that we're in. So I'm hearing a lot from different categories. Hopefully what I can share with you today will shorten the learning curve and give you insights, and also just encourage you to show up in your very best, most authentic way to your communities. So that's where we're going to start today, is the fact that you are a trusted expert. And I need to adjust one quick thing on my screen. Hang on. Oops, sorry. That was not what I meant to do. There we go. Well, okay, I guess I'm not gonna be able to do that. So you are a trusted expert, and I wanted to make sure that we started with this because ultimately, I'm sorry, hang on one second. I just need to get back to our screen. There we are. Okay, take it from the top. You are a trusted expert, okay? You are literally a guide to your communities, and that includes your internal workforce, your close external stakeholders, such as your customers, your sales reps, your brands, if you have close relationships with them, which you obviously do, as well as extended audiences, such as people who follow you on social media, etc. While we may not feel like experts right now in what we're navigating in our businesses, that's how our communities and audiences see us. So I wanted to just start by saying, yes, we are in completely uncharted waters in the middle of a class 5 rapid, and we need to kind of guide other people through that in our community. And what I mean by that is not necessarily you needed to help them get through it in terms of giving them like instruction or basic blocking and tackling. You need to remain that light in their lives that they love to tether themselves to. Because people are really looking for non-COVID related communication. They really and truly want to belong to something right now that's just part of their happy place in their life. And cooperation is something that kicks in our human DNA when we're faced with crisis. Cooperation ties right back into community. So just know that your people, whether they're close internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, are really needing to hear from you at this point. And we're going to talk about how to do that. But before I go into that, I want to just first acknowledge, I know there are people on this call that are really coming in from all different places on the spectrum in terms of how they're navigating the incredible hardship and challenges that are being presented to us as small business owners, independent business owners, and frankly, specialty business owners who got into this not with the goal of potentially making millions and millions of dollars, but rather the goal of serving like-minded people who love what you love and who get just an absolute deep satisfaction out of sharing what they love with a community. That's ultimately what brought us into these communities. What we're facing now is unprecedented. And I just want to make sure that you know, as I go through this and talk about communication, in no way am I glossing over the absolute importance of merely keeping the lights on in your company right now. I believe wholeheartedly that your communications as a brand and a business are one of the only things that we can control right now. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Why that's important is one of the biggest assets that you can build during this time and that you have control over is your community. And that is ultimately the pond you're going to fish in when people do start to transact again, and they will through and after this crisis. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that up front, that I definitely want to have a high level of respect for exactly where you are and what you're navigating in your business. I'm here to just offer some tips and tools and things that you can deploy today and throughout this crisis to really build your communication, keep your audience warm and nurtured so that they're ready and there for you when transaction does start again. So that ties right back into why you founded the business. And that's the fact that you're an expert and people see you as that. Okay. I'm sorry, there's just this box that I have to keep moving. Okay, so again, our situation that our agenda today is I'll go ahead and frame the 5-part framework and then talk a lot about the importance of and how to keep your audiences engaged. I'm going to really focus on 3 stakeholder groups. So that's workforce, close external stakeholders, and then broader external stakeholders. And then we'll hit the Q&A. So I'm going to make sure that I save plenty of time for that. We're sitting at 10 after the hour right now. I'm going to try and fire through this presentation in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll have the rest of the time for Q&A. Okay, so I don't need to go into the details of the current landscape because everybody is facing their own version of this. Obviously, we have the foundation, which is the news cycle that continues to happen, whether we wanted to or not. As all of us know, in the past month, we've had days where we've literally started the day with one consumer sentiment that we're part of as broader consumers and just broader society, and finished the day with a much different ambiance to that. That's happened a number of times. I've never in my life as a journalist or as an agency owner seen a news cycle like this ever. And it is something that we really need to look at as if we're on an expedition together and we're literally like about to send that final pitch to the summit. We have to be watching the weather super closely in order to actually successfully get up there and get back down again. That's basically what the news cycle represents to me as somebody who helps companies guide their communications. And I just want to make sure that, there's mass uncertainty inside and outside of the business community. The situation is changing daily and sometimes hourly. And again, one of the only things we can control is how we show up. I mean, that's true in life as it's true in our business, and never has it been more true in our business with our communications as it is today. I also just want to say, I do have a piece of content that I've been researching and writing for a couple of days now that talks a lot about human psychology and consumer sentiment. And I base the consumer sentiment portion of that on the 2008 recession. And I know that that's not an apples to apples comp, but it is one of the only comps that we have. So I'm going to be offering that on Facebook Live later today, and then that will be a podcast at Channel Mastery, hopefully by the end of the week. It takes us a couple days to turn those around. So keep an eye on that, because I will be going on a much deeper dive with consumer sentiment and just basically how we as humans react to these types of crises. Okay. So obviously I've said this already, communication is super important. I talk with our clients and people within my network across our markets all day, all weekend. Like, that's all I've been doing for 4 weeks straight. I'm learning a lot. And even though I might talk to clients about keeping the lights on with their social media, they still call and ask, is it appropriate to do this? Because the news cycle and the backdrop is changing so much. And honestly, the answer is always yes, but you have to come at this, like anything, with a very well thought out plan, and you have to go to where your audience is. So it's very important that you are keeping the lights on and nurturing your audiences, but you do have to do that in a way that is super mindful of what's happening in the news behind them, in terms of like the backdrop. And that's really what our framework is about. So the team at Verde and I built this framework right at the beginning of the crisis, and we built it to be an evergreen framework that can be used again and again as the news cycle changes. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through that framework with you today. And throughout the framework, I'm going to give you ideas on how to understand where your audience is, because ultimately there's the broader society and the news backdrop, but then there's also our audiences as specialty brands that we have to be very tailored and retain a brand voice with, so they understand and trust where we are, who we are, where we're coming from, etc. So I'll go ahead and talk about how we do that today with digital platforms. And just as a super interesting quick aside, as I was putting together the content for the Facebook Live that I'm doing later today, I did find a Harvard Business Review article that talks about how to market in a downturn that came out in April 2009. And one of the most interesting things I found in there, because that was really before social media had taken over like it has in our lives today, obviously, it talked about the importance of keeping your core consumers, like your most enthusiastic repeat consumers, communicated with. And they were talking about radio and billboards and things that are really tertiary now to how we do that. We can do so much more today and in such a quicker time frame. So that's another thing that I want to just say is a plus in terms of making sure that you're keeping your audiences engaged and warm through this crisis. Okay, so the first step is identifying your audiences, and it's really important no matter how small your business is. I doubt that you're in it 100% alone. So let's say you're a very, very small retail entity. You might have 1 or 2 employees. They possibly are furloughed, or maybe they're still at work. It's important that whether you have a tiny company or a larger company, that you bring together a few people on your team that can help inform exactly who your audience, your primary audiences are. Always include your workforce 100%, but when you're considering your close external stakeholders, consumers or shoppers are definitely right there, as well as anybody who you kind of regularly communicate with in and around your company. That can be a close sales rep, associate, brands you have great relationships with, etc. And then the third audience usually is the broader social media following that you have, or your newsletter audience, etc. So people who are engaged with your brand and want to hear from you, but they are not necessarily looking to maybe they're not working with you as closely as, say, some of your closest consumers are. So it's really, really important that you grab a small group of people, almost like a little work task force within your that are really important is obviously point number 1, keep your employees safe. And then you also want to continue to serve customers with the highest standards. And ultimately, this is super, super important, and it's something we're going to get into in depth, because Randy, actually, we did a couple of rehearsal calls around this presentation for you. And one of the things we really wanted to make sure we emphasize and we want to take questions on is the fact that there's definitely our ethics are on display. And what I mean by that is, if, for example, your shop remains open and you're maybe on social media talking about some things, there are some people who are going to come after you and, you know, basically accuse you of not keeping the curve flat and all of that. So we will talk about some cases around that, ideally most likely in the Q&A for today. But my point is as you're looking at this framework, step 2 is agree to your guiding principles and goals. And number 1 is always, we're keeping our employees safe. Number 2 should always be our company is acting as best we can as a corporate citizen, and that's important no matter what size your business is. And then again, that ties right into doing our part to slow the spread of this virus. And then step 3, you want to identify your vehicles to communicate and the timing with which you do that. And ultimately, this is about your channels. And our agency produces a podcast called Channel Mastery. The purpose of that is to enable specialty brand leaders to understand where their target consumers are engaging with, discovering, sharing, and ultimately converting with what they're offering, whether it's a bike shop or whether it's a brand with a product or a service provider. So that could look like internal newsletters, social media, website, your store. And ultimately, I want to just say a few words about newsletters right now. People are getting completely avalanched by email. And I'm sure that you've seen some of the, late night shows that are basically talking about how hilarious it is that if you shopped on a website in 1999, you are getting an email from that company saying what their COVID-19 policy and approach is. And so just keep in mind, the more personal you can make your newsletter communication, i.e. from a person, not from a company, the more likely you are to have, solid click-throughs on that. And also we're small specialty businesses or just specialty brands. Some of those are not small, I get, but like we need to remember that we are, excuse me, ultimately they're connecting with emotionally with us as people. All right. One quick thing. So you also on newsletter and with social media, you want to be consistent. So for example, if you say in a newsletter that comes from your CEO or president, like a leader of your company, we're going to be offering you resources to help as a member of our community, help us get through this together. You can expect that from us every Tuesday afternoon. Make sure you follow through on that. This window of communication is all about building trust, and that can be, first order business is consistency. Every touch point brings trust. So if you have a newsletter that goes out on time, that's trust. If you have regular social media, that's trust. Excuse me. And then step 4, we're firing through this quite quickly, is you want to basically create an outline of what you're going to be doing to serve your audiences. So I would look at this in a couple different ways. You want to essentially look at your community that comprises your newsletter list, for example. Chances are good that is your local community if you're a retailer. And if you're a brand, it's your most engaged fans and followers. Those who raise their hand to join your newsletter truly are wanting to hear more from you, and they are considered brand fans. So you want to make sure that you understand where they came from, and you want to localize your communication to be relevant to them. So a great example of this would be a Pilates gym right now having to close their doors for physical classes, offering classes on Zoom or WebEx. Inviting their local community in to do that, doing a fireside chat with a local community. My CrossFit gym here is doing fantastic, online gatherings, etc. People are getting really creative with this. Oftentimes you might step back and be like, gosh, everyone's doing this. I don't know if what I'm going to do is helpful. Don't let that perfectionist voice crowd what you might do right now. You need to just test and learn, get out there and try some things to keep your people and your fan base engaged. And I think that that's really important. And also, I think as your communication evolves, this outline should evolve. So for example, the second bullet point really applies to if you're just starting to communicate around COVID. My guess is if you haven't started to do that, I doubt you really need to do that now as like a headline in social media or newsletter. Maybe drum up some communication if you've gone dark with your internal workforce and with your external audiences via newsletter or social. And, you know, you can ask them, what is it that you'd like to see? Or, hey, we're going to open this bike fit clinic, or we're going to go ahead and link into some Zwift classes. Or I saw a really cool thing on Trainer Road just 2 nights ago. I was reading cycling news, and I guess trainerroad.com is offering like where you can ride with 5 people on a ride together. And I realize you probably have to have a membership to that, but I think they might have a free trial. And if you were able to maybe put like a local celebrity in your community in and invite 5 people to, or 4 people to ride with them, that can be a really interesting way to keep your audience engaged. And we can put the links. We're going to send this deck around to everybody with a lot of links that you'll see on the last slide, and we'll add to that as well. So I can add the Trainer Road link to that as well. And then ultimately, it's not that you have to create like a marketing plan around this, you know, communicating during this crisis, but it's a really great time to be revisiting some of the foundational pieces of your business's communication. So for example, if you find that your job has really changed, or maybe you have an associate who is not quite as busy right now because of everything that we're dealing with, it's a really incredible time to actually revisit your mission and vision, revisit what channels are most active for your brand and how you're seeing people reacting and responding to your content. And then ultimately, you know, you can bolster those key foundational pieces and create a crisis communications campaign, if you will, that maybe goes from April to June. And you basically chart in there, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to do this, and Saturday's our newsletter, something like that, where you're hitting it every single week and you're providing resource-based content. This is not the time to harvest. This is the time to serve. So you don't have to think about it in terms of like, wow, I really need to like sell through this product, etc. You really have to come at this right now to your communities as a way of serving them, not so much like trying to get them to buy something. And then ultimately, at the bottom of your communication, you can always update your company plan and how you're managing COVID if it has changed, or if there's anything that you want to share around how your business is operating right now. Living here in Durango, Mountain Bike Specialist is my shop, and they have sent not an intrusive amount of email, but they've sent probably 3 emails in the past month that update me on what they're doing to, you know, not sell so much, but serve their consumers in terms of like fixing bikes and how they're picking up and dropping off, and how you know, work with them as a business during this time with our, you know, what we have in Colorado in place in terms of isolation. So that is completely appropriate, but as you're sending that out, you can also provide resource-based content, like, you know, so-and-so is going to be hosting this live stream. Or don't be afraid to tap into what your brands might be offering. So if you happen to sell a few brands, you know, you're known for those brands in your community, ask those brands if there are resources that you can share with your local community. For example, I saw that 100% Eyewear had their athletes creating playlists. They sent that out to their entire newsletter list. And why not, if you carry that brand, for example, why wouldn't you repurpose that and put it on your social media and, you know, say, hey, one of our brands is offering this. We thought it was great. Hopefully this will help you if you're doing indoor training, etc. So don't be afraid to tap back into what your brands are already creating and making that localized for your community. This is a really, really important one, and it is essentially mind your channels. So this means you can't, there's 2 things I'm seeing right now, and this is even with our brands who we work with really closely. Some of them are super short staffed, and this is on the brand side, not the retailer side, and they just have not had time to mind their channels. And what I mean by that is they have not either changed what they had planned to run on their channels, or they haven't run anything on their channels, and both of those are understandable for sure. But I will tell you that that is not a good long-term strategy. You want to essentially merchandise your website that has maybe like one of those sliders or some sort of information that's pinned on the front page of your website that talks about your COVID approach, because that is really important for people who are curious about it. They always come back to the company website, whether you're a retailer or a brand, to find the true news, or to really see what's happening in their community around bikes. I mean, I felt like this myself. This weekend I was going out to ride, and I was like, I wonder if I'm allowed to do this. And so I called my shop, or I went to a couple websites in town, and I was able to see, like, yes, we're still allowed to ride outside. But that's an example of somebody who will be coming to your site anyway to find the real news. And one of the things I saw recently in an article that I thought was interesting is your consumers, so your workforce, not your consumers, I'm sorry, so your workforce, actually workers are looking to their employers as the most trusted place for them to find news right now, because they're so tied to what's happening in the economy, what might happen to their job, etc. What's going on at their company? Are their coworkers safe? And by and large, hands down, people are looking at their employers as like the #1 way to see the quote real news, and have it be filtered for them as the employee, right? And so if you think about that and your trusted audiences out there, you want to make sure your website is merchandised in a way that's updated and reflects your policy, that it's very clear to see how to connect with your social media, how to join a newsletter list, and then make sure that if they join your newsletter list, there's an auto response email that goes right out saying, thank you so much for joining our list. This is the type of content we put out, and we put it out every Thursday. And then stick to that, and don't put it on set and forget. Like if you had created a sequence back in December and that's what's going out, you'd need to go in and update that, or just make sure you read through it and make sure it doesn't sound tone deaf. And then also just make sure you're minding your channels in terms of your social media. You want to make sure that the channels that you're most often on, say it's Facebook and Instagram, possibly LinkedIn or Twitter, depending on the type of business you have, that you are posting regularly and that you're looking at the responses. That's the #1 place that you can see how your audience sentiment is around your content. And if you're considering doing something new, say you're going to do your own version of what I was saying 100% Eyewear did, you could essentially look at what some other brands or retailers have done and look at the sentiment around it in order to kind of look around the corners a little bit and make sure that what you're going to do is not going to be tone deaf or fall on the wrong side of the shame equation. Because believe me, there's a lot going on out there in terms of people policing social media right now, and they're doing this in a way to, again, with the goal of flattening the curve. We don't understand or really know necessarily like where people are in their journey with COVID, so we have to have empathy and not be so on the defensive. So if you end up having somebody come after you in a hater-like way on your social media, just engage with them in an honest way and say, we're doing our best, thank you for your feedback, we'll keep that in mind going forward. Now is really not the time to be adversarial, and if somebody does post something that is just adversarial and doesn't help the community or conversation, obviously you can work to delete that or disinvite them from a group, etc. But what my point is that you want to make sure that you're in there, that you're showing that you're a human, you're working on your human-to-human connection. It doesn't have to be every day, all day, but I would keep a consistency and an empathetic approach that is service first across all of your communication right now, leading with that of your employees. Okay, and then I also have a point to make about fake news. That is also, there's so many intricacies around this pandemic. I mean, we've never actually been in a pandemic before when we've had citizen journalism, if you will, with social media or fake news, frankly. People are really not trusting what they're seeing in the news or on social media. So you want to make sure you're always leading with fact-based anything, okay? And if you have something substantially different to that is fact-based, make sure you're posting it and referencing back to a previous link. So again, the more that you can build trust right now, the better off you're going to be. Like, it truly is. I like to think of this with newsletter audiences, so email marketing first. You own your email list. You don't own your Twitter, your Instagram, your Facebook. your LinkedIn. The companies that manage those platforms own the algorithms for those, and they essentially can turn off your access to your audience today if they felt like making a change in their algorithm. Another example of this is Amazon right now putting their household goods focus on, basically what people need in the crisis. That has really changed how products and services are searched for on Amazon, and it has definitely made it more difficult to show up to the consumer who might be interested in what you're buying, what you're selling. So that's an example of a platform changing an algorithm and you losing access that you normally have to an audience in a way that you might have created in, budget revenue around. So keep in mind the safest way to go right now is to nurture your social media audiences and do everything you can to get them to join your email list, and then do a really good job serving that email list, growing that list, because ultimately that is the asset that you are going to come out of the other side of this with. That will be your audience that you're able to transact with. We call it the pond that you're going to fish in. So you want to make sure that you keep that pond healthy and stocked, if you will. Super important. And I do realize there's a lot on the horizon with privacy around email and social media. We're starting to see that already, but for right now, during the crisis, email marketing is still something you can own in terms of your list. You can own the message, you can own the cadence and everything else. So I highly encourage you to focus on best practices with your email marketing. Okay, and with that, we already talked about this. So again, make sure on your website that you have strong visibility to your social media platforms. I also want to make a quick notation about video and Instagram, TV and Facebook Lives, etc. We're doing a video presentation right now. You've probably been doing a ton of these throughout the last month, and we're going to be doing more of them for a while. So people are going to be more and more used to and have a higher expectation for video. That means that you may be, as you're considering your marketing and your communication right now, as we talked about a few minutes ago, where you might be upgrading that or up-leveling that, you might want to be putting more attention into the videos that you're creating. Think about the fact that consumers are literally running out of content to view to kind of escape the COVID virus. I mean, I am an avid consumer of cycling YouTube and cycling videos, reading bike reviews. I am currently researching a gravel bike purchase, which is on hold temporarily, but I will be making one at some point this year, I hope. And I literally cannot find enough reviews on product. And I even told mountain bike specialists this: you should be making, reviews happen, like as you're getting bikes in, or if you have product in and you have time, just try doing a bike review. Watch what other companies and shops are doing and see what you can do in terms of putting some things together for content for your community. And maybe now is a really good time to try and set up a YouTube channel. We will have a YouTube best practices PDF at Verde in the next couple of, it's probably even within the next week. I think we have something that we're going to be putting on our blog, and we'll put the links to the website and the blog in the follow-up to this. But it's about testing and learning. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just know that there are a lot of people out there searching for things that you could create videos around that showcase your expertise. And I know it's definitely not awesome for me to have to do Facebook Lives. I don't wake up excited on those days, but I do it because I know if I'm going to be asking you and our clients to do that and the Channel Mastery audience to do that, I need to do that too. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I won't say that it's like riding a bike, because honestly, it's not easy to do necessarily. Like, everybody has a little bit of a insecurity around it, but my point is just show up. Doesn't have to be pro, and get it done and provide some content and try some new things during this time. I also want to say one of the links that we're going to have in our resources for you is a podcast that I did with Ryan Atkinson. I think we've done 2 shows with Smart Etailing, and the last show that we did was leading into holiday last year, and he talks a lot about evergreen best practices with physical storefronts and online storefronts for that physical storefront. I just said basically what I'm trying to say: make sure that your physical presence has an online presence right now, and that has to do with taking what your shop does, the people in it, the brands you sell, and make sure that it's online in a way that feels like they're seeing the same thing That's a huge thing that is very important to have right now. It builds trust. It gives the consumer the choice they expect because they're being trained by mega retailers, mega brands, marketplaces every day to have incredible amounts of video, credible but we will have the transcript for Ryan's Channel Mastery interview, which happened, I believe, in November. We'll have that as part of our resources for you. Okay, we are just about ready to answer, get to the Q&A. I wanted to make sure that we're showcasing a few highlights here, that it's not so much like feel, let's feel good, look at what's happening here, because I realize there's this undercurrent of just survival in our businesses right now. One of the things that's really important to share from a content standpoint is some good news, okay? So obviously what 100% is doing with their playlists and their athletes is entertaining, it's fun, it's light. Some brands are also using their audiences reach and their brands for positive change. We have a client by the name of Kitspo that has gotten a lot of news coverage because 2 weeks ago they converted their small North Carolina factory. They just moved their production to create plastic and fabric face masks. And obviously we're seeing lots and lots of manufacturing, which is super great. Stepping in to do the same thing. Kitspo was one of the first. They put it out in their newsletter. I socialized it and Verde socialized it, and we sent it to some media via social media. We didn't actually create a press release because we felt it was too overt, and this was definitely not something they did to like garner press attention, but it garnered a ton of press attention because they were at the front end of that. And Western North Carolina businesses are banding together to do that. So Industry 9, Kitspo, Sylvan Sport, there's a lot going on in little clusters of manufacturing. And if you're aligned with any of these brands, it's something great to share on your shops or your brand social media. So here's a couple of examples for you. And again, you're going to get this entire deck, so I don't need to go line by line. So again, the goal with sharing this with you is to give you ideas of things to aggregate and put on your social media, create a blog post around, putting into your newsletter. Like the point of this is to share what some of the brands you're associated with are doing that's great, because that definitely shows that you're supportive of that, and it puts your ethics out there again to your community. All right, we have made it to Q&A. So with that, I want to make sure that I have access to the questions. I don't see, okay, here we go. Maybe they're down here. Brandy, I'm not seeing where the questions are. Is there a way that you can hop in and help me out with this?
I think Rochelle is going to ask you the questions that are coming in.
Okay, thank you. Rochelle, I'm all ears.
Perfect. We have a few. First one, what are a few tips for keeping our staff busy while working at home?
That is a great question, and I'm going to go right back to, if this is an employee who has been working on your marketing, it's a no-brainer to enable them to work with you on a 2-month window of communications, or revamping your mission and vision, for example, and maybe putting that into a shared doc or a shared work platform like Slack or Asana. A shared document like Google Docs is another way to do this, where people working in a number of remote locations can work on the same document. So that's one thing that you can do if they are not used to working, or have been tasked to work on your social media. I would say putting together a brand Bible of sorts is what we call it. So it's essentially like a small set of guidelines for how to talk about your brand, hashtags that you use, the way that you like to have your pictures your images and video presented, etc. If you put, and we'll put a couple of examples. I have a couple top of mind examples I can put links to in our resources that we'll be sending you. But ultimately, if you create that style guide of sorts and share that with a couple of your employees, and then a calendar in maybe Google that you can share with them, you can actually come up with some ideas that might triangulate, like brand, athletes, community, things that you can provide and put in, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or whatever it is that your plan is for the next couple of months. And then they'll have a set of guidelines to go ahead and start helping you with that. One of the ways that we've seen this successful with remote teams is, again, using something like Google Docs or Dropbox, for example. You can create social media assets. So for example, they could work from home and put together Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. They can actually pull together the assets, that the verbiage, the videos, everything that they plan to post, put it in a shared document to get approval, and then go ahead and schedule it. And that's a way that you could keep them busy. Another thing that I think would be great is to consider doing a survey with some of your absolute best customers on what type of content they'd want to see and how you can serve them right now. That's something else that I think would be a great assignment to keep people busy while they're working from home. And then maybe a third thing you could do is some market research. So if you happen to, maybe you're an IBD in Seattle and you're not able to go in and work from the shop, you're able to maybe look at some other shops around the country and some of the things that they're doing to be resourceful to their audiences at this time. It doesn't mean like they're still open and I'm not. It's more, what are they doing to position the brands they carry? How are they serving their local communities? And maybe assign that to one of your employees who's working from home as an ongoing thing they need to report back to everybody else on. Hey, I found a really interesting thing in Tennessee. What can we do that's similar to this? Or I've put together an idea that's similar to this. What do you guys think, etc. So that's a great way to do it. And another thing that I'll say is we have two fantastic nonprofits that we work for and have worked for a number of years. One is the Conservation Alliance, and we also have a great relationship with People for Bikes. And I know everybody on this call is familiar with that awesome organization. And then Camber Outdoors is basically a resource for businesses, large and small, in specialty, to really improve how they do diversity, equity, and inclusion in their work culture. We all know that there's a lot of furloughs and layoffs happening. There's going to be a lot of shifting of employment and a lot of HR challenges as we start to kind of get back online and head into our new normal after this crisis. This is a great time to be training your staff or researching how your company could create, I think, learning opportunities or policies or best practices around diversity, equity, and inclusion, cause marketing, such as how you protect the environment, or potentially looking at creating an expert on your team around advocacy or some of the great resources that are being offered by People for Bikes, such as e-bikes, etc. There's really no shortage of examples where you could actually train your employees digitally. Ideally, they will be more endeared to you for that, and hopefully more prone to stay after the business, takes back off. Hopefully, snaps right back is what we are visualizing over here. Essentially, investing in your people and trying to make your workplace top tier is a great way to be spending your time right now as well. I know that was a lengthy answer, but I have a lot of really strong commitment myself to that area, so I hope that that's helpful.
Great. Okay, next one. Can you suggest a few themes for us to touch on in social media during this time, and how often should we be communicating those things on social media?
That's a fantastic question. So I'm going to hit the second half of that first. So I'm going to make sure I don't forget the themes. So let's look at cadence. No matter what you've done up to this point, whether it was before the COVID crisis or during, I want to encourage you to always feel that you can go back out to your audience. So we're going to just use an example that maybe you weren't consistently posting before the crisis, and now that the crisis has happened, you've gone completely dark. it's okay to create a new, we call them hello world posts. So you don't want to say that, but you can say the team and I, as the founder, as the president, etc., we're interested in, providing resources and supporting our community. We realize we haven't been active on our channels, but we're going to change that going forward. You can expect us to be on Instagram 2 days a week, if that's on Instagram, etc. So channel by channel, you are doing a reintroduction. Just be super authentic, be quick about it, and then you could even say, if it's in your newsletter, for example, or on any of the platforms, really, make it a two-way conversation and say what type of content would be resourceful to you right now. And again, if this is the first time you've communicated, at the end of that communication, it is a good idea to say, check out our website for how our business has changed operations because of the COVID crisis, so that at least that's out there somewhere. So if you have been, regularly communicating through your email and social, I think that now is the time to not necessarily ratchet up the cadence, because there's a lot of content. I was speaking about newsletters earlier. We're getting inundated with newsletters. I would keep the cadence, like if you've been doing once or twice a week, keep it at that, depending on the platform. Of course, Instagram, I think you can do more. Best practice on Twitter, I think, is 3 to 4 times a week or more. If you have something to say, you don't want to just show up there without having a plan. LinkedIn, I think best practice is 2 or 3 times a week if you're active there, but if it's something you don't have time to do, once a week is fine. I have a lot of followers on LinkedIn, and sometimes I forget to even promote our podcast there because I get busy, so I totally understand. The point is just try and be regular and show up at least, I think, once a week at minimum on social media. And then in your newsletters, if you have something to share once a week, if you're just checking in and offering resources and kind of being more light about it, every other week should be fine. I think that what you're asking could be a really good blog post for us to create at Verde. So I'm going to go ahead and have our team work on something with that, and I'll make sure I let the team at NBDA know when that will be going live. I think it's a great question, and it's one that I think a lot of companies have. Hopefully that helps, but know that I'll get some more resources together for you on that.
All right, question. Is it insensitive or inappropriate at this time to post ride photos on our social media?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that your team at NBDA and my team at Verde have discussed a couple times prior to this webinar, because we realize that it's a little bit of a dichotomy to try and keep your community excited about what it is you sell and offer, which obviously is some sort of access to the community of cycling, and not be able to potentially show something like that. We've seen that trade organizations like SIA just posted a campaign recently about being careful in the backcountry, because again, brands were, a lot of backcountry product had been selling because the ski area is closed. A lot of people were heading out there, and there was a lot of concern and a lot of shaming going on around, you really shouldn't be in the backcountry right now. If you are injured, you could potentially take a bed away from a person with COVID-19 who needs it, etc. That is a very real sentiment out there, and chances are good that if you do post something without some kind of context, you could get some arrows in your back for that. But again, it's okay to have that happen as long as you're addressing it. But for example, if you're going to post something about that, depending on where you're located and what you're showcasing, you can say something like, our heart and soul is in mountain biking. We can't wait to get back out there when the time is right. But for the meantime, look at this great gallery that we've created to keep you excited about what's to come in the warmer months, or something like that. That's one way of handling it. Or you could say, we want to be sensitive to, not pushing it and not getting injured, but at the same time, our community looks to us to provide inspiration, and we're all tied together with a love for mountain biking. So we wanted to present this gallery or this video. Another way I've seen some brands doing this that's worked really well is they are very aware that people want this content. So showcasing, for example, past spring classics on YouTube, we're seeing a ton of media outlets put together, packaged content of the last 5 years of Paris-Roubaix or something like that. And being able to promote that on your page and just say, this is for everybody who's in isolation right now. Let's come together and watch some of the best of moments from here. Thank you, InCycle, for putting this together, and then, you know, call them out. So there's ways to share your passion responsibly. You just have to always make sure your caption is in proper context to what's happening in the news cycle. And then I think on another note there, again, I can't stress enough about making sure that you're jockeying your social media. So for example, what I mean by that is if you do get a negative comment, a real human being is ideally like a person who runs the company, leads the company, is higher up in the company, is in the comments saying, I understand your concern. This was our intention. We'll be more careful about it in the future. But please know, you know, we are here to provide our community with inspiration as well. We'll try and do that in the most responsible way we can. Please join our community, or something like that. So that's a fantastic question. Always keep in mind the backdrop of news. If you, for example, have a week's worth of content ready to go, and some sort of big news on the national or global landscape happens around this crisis, make sure that you're revisiting, is this a good idea to post today? You may have had something scheduled for Wednesday, news pops up that morning and it makes it completely tone deaf, and you don't want to have that happen. We have a couple of big campaigns we're working on right now. One is this Dirty Cans of virtual immersive online experience that we're offering for campers that had the camp canceled. We're opening it to the entire world of cycling if they want to join it. It starts tomorrow, and we're literally going to delay it if there's a big change that happens in the news cycle that would make it inappropriate, and the client's completely on board with that. So just keep in mind that that always has to be like a governor there, if you will, like never just set and forget your content right now. Always be checking in with, you know, what's happening in the news before you go forward with something like that. That's where you start, build that contextualization in your captions and whatnot.
All right. The next question, how can we make cleaning protocols, for lack of a better word, a little more sexy? It's not a fun topic to talk about, but it's super important that we communicate it to our customers.
That's a great question. And I haven't been given that question yet, so I really appreciate the question. And I'm assuming you're talking about informing your close community around, you know, what they can expect if they're, you know, maybe going to be coming into your shop if it's remaining open as an essential business. And I think that showing video around this is key. And maybe there's a way that you can, you know, identify, here's the bucket list, this is what we're doing. It's, you know, so much more than we normally do. It's following the CDC protocol, but then you have a video or an image of people they know and trust who work in your shop, or, you know, something that kind of makes it more human to human than just listing like bullet points. This is how we're keeping our business clean for you right now. It's a very, very good question. It's super important to put the meat and potatoes out there like that right now. Very responsible. You're being a great corporate citizen. You're doing everything that you can. But I think, you know, the more that you can humanize it by using your team or you personally, the better it'll be. So a way you could do this, for example, is if you're on LinkedIn, you can create a post that maybe says, here's what we're doing. We're following this protocol. And then you can do a quick LinkedIn video explaining it, saying, you know, while I realize this isn't the most riveting topic, it's important that we're sharing with you how much time and how many resources we're putting into our best practice around keeping the shop clean or something. And so you're humanizing it even as like a talking head. That, I think, alone will really make the message carry forward more effectively. And if it's in a newsletter, maybe include some images or a link to a short video. There is a really cool email platform that I tried right about a month ago that I've been using a ton, and I think it's called BombBomb, and it's BOM, and we'll put the links in the resources page for you. But essentially, it's a Google Chrome extension, and you pop open an email, and you can just record a video right there, so you can, you know, put in the contents of your email and record a video of yourself talking personally. So that might be a great way to help convey this in a way that's more humanized and brings more of a human touch to some pretty dry content. It's a great question, though.
All right, looks like we have one more. Since we're considered essential businesses in some areas, should we focus only on how we can serve, or should we also include sales and promotions?
I would lead with how you can serve, and keep in mind that for people who have kids at home, for example, selling kids bikes is a service right now. Obviously, you want to do that in a way that has the context of please be careful. We can't, afford to give up hospital beds, etc. But, at the end of your email, you can say, we do have these products in stock, or check out this website, or check out this link to what we have in stock right now. If there's anything that you need, to get through this period of isolation as a family, we're here to be a resource for you. I would definitely not lead with anything like sales focused. I see so many larger online retailers doing this right now. I understand why they're doing it, but it's very damaging in my opinion. I know that they may not have a choice right now. I'm not here to judge that, but my point is they're basically training consumers to be looking for deals, and that's not opportune. But it does actually set us up as specialty businesses to really take that human to human approach and provide, here's why we're an essential business. Here's how we're taking that super seriously for our local community. And please know that we're open for business. That includes sales and service. Give us a call if you have any questions or something like that. I would always try and bring it back to like a conversation with a person if you can, or showcasing yourself like human to human. I think that's really important. So that's a fantastic question. It's also one that I would consider not like keeping the same opinion on as the crisis continues to evolve. So for example, that's where we are right now. As weather gets nicer in your area, you might want to message it a little differently next week, or maybe if as we get closer to the end of the self-isolation, of course, put it out there differently. But I think right now, serving first and selling second is definitely the right way to go. So if there aren't any other questions, I do have a couple of things I wanted to add before we wrapped up today.
We did get a last question, if that's all right.
Of course.
So somebody says our county in San Mateo just came out with a new rule that says you cannot ride a bike more than 5 miles from home. Is this something that we should push back on, or do we have to step back, see the bigger picture, and let our customers know how you can work with this?
I would say the latter. Trying to fight municipal process or regulations right now is going to be probably a waste of energy and resources, and also could polarize part of your audience. I know that may not be the answer you're looking for, but at the same time, I do feel strongly after, again, consuming a lot of content globally in the cycling community. I've seen, athletes from countries like Italy, who obviously are going through a horrific version of what we're in right now in America. They're actually coming out and like making responsible claims like right at home, etc. Brands are doing that as well on a national level. And if you were to pipe up from like a regional community level, there's a chance you could get significant backlash from that. So I would think, at a time like this where cooperation really needs to be what's ruling the day, I would say that I would go with supporting your latter choice on that. It's a very, very good question. But again, what I'm trying to do is give you the way forward that will be less, this one would have a lot of obstacles for you to overcome. And I think right now we're using enough calories in our brain to just navigate our businesses. And you don't want to lose any customers right now. You want to build trust with your customers. And I think at this time, choosing to cooperate is probably the way to go on that.
All right, that was the last one. No more.
Okay, I just had a few things I wanted to touch base on before we wrap up today. I do realize that there's potential around essential businesses remaining open to get backlash. So again, we did address that with a couple of questions that you had in terms of what should we be posting, how should we work with municipality regulations like we just talked about. So you basically just want to make sure that you're being a very good corporate citizen just the same way you're trying to be a great citizen right now. You're trying to really do everything you can personally to flatten the curve. You realize the importance of that. Your business's reach is really important for that. And as I said back at the beginning, you're an expert and people will be looking to you to enforce that. So I just want to say that that's important. And getting backlash is sort of part of the game as you're continuing to nurture your audience. Go back in and make sure that you're doing human to human interaction around anything that you get like that, unless it's just completely like adversarial. And in that case, you might just want to, either hide the comment, unfollow them, etc., or take it offline if possible. So I just also wanted to say that listening is a really, really important tool right now. Obviously, I've talked a ton about communicating. The team at NBDA was very, very clear that they wanted me to wrap up today with saying listening is equally important. And that is so true as specialty brands and businesses. We have to be part of our community. They want to look up to us as an extension of their identity. And if they don't relate with us, it's very hard for them to do that. The only way we can truly relate with them is if we're really good listeners. So how do you do that? Well, you engage with your most trusted consumers, right, or customers. You can actually direct message them or pick up the phone and call them and talk to them about the type of content they'd like to see or what their thoughts are on something, that you want to post, what their thoughts are on that. So keeping that hand-to-hand communication is key, and then watching how people are reacting with your content and like-minded content that's online. Just making sure you're getting a sense of that sentiment. The more you do this every day, the more it really becomes part of who you are as a business leader and owner or employee in charge of communication. It's a really, really important attribute that we have to continue to form. It's a daily practice right now, and it is something that will definitely serve you in the future, and that is embedding with your audiences right now as much as you can, looking at how they're responding to you, what you're posting, and reaching out and talking to them and checking on them right now. And then another thing that NBDA wanted me to talk about as well is obviously bike shops have worked for a very long time building community and serving community, and it's very, very tough to consider like maintaining that as we have this self-isolation in place. And I just want to say we've talked about a lot of solutions around that. And if this is something specifically you'd like to get more ideas on, I'm happy to create some additional content through Verde that we can share with your community right away. That's something that I think a lot of businesses are wondering. But again, virtual engagement is really important. We're seeing so many very, very creative ways people are getting together online right now. I mentioned Trainer Road. Obviously, everybody knows about what Strava's doing with Rafa. I'm sure you're watching what pro athletes are doing. You're looking at their pain caves. All of this is fodder that you can share, but keep in mind that's all still like related to COVID. And oftentimes they may just want to see something from you that has to do with their community. Like maybe it's featuring something light, like, send us a picture of your dog and how they're coping with having you around all the time, or something like that will resonate with your community. I just want to make sure you're offering a variety of content through your channels, because ultimately that's going to give you more to look at in terms of what's hitting the mark and what isn't. And you want to, again, be practicing that every day in terms of understanding where your community is on a sentiment level. And then the last thing that I wanted to speak about is preparing for post-coronavirus. And that is how we'll finish today. And ultimately, how do you get your business back in fighting shape when consumers might have been trained to look for other resources online? And that's a fantastic question, and something that we should continue to address as a community here. I'm happy to do more webinars or create resources on that just for you. But I do want to say the number one way to do that right now is to understand where your consumers are. And to do that through how you're communicating with them, I think is a really great opportunity to build the asset that you have in your audiences. I think your owned asset, number one owned asset, is your email list, and knowing that that list is comprised of people who are your consumers, who have raised their hand to be part of your brand. you own the email list. You know how you can communicate with them. You can see how they're opening your emails. You can facilitate two-way conversation. You can send them simple, fun surveys. There's all kinds of things that you can do that you won't lose control of in terms of how you access them, at least in the next 6 months. I would think. I have no idea what's going to happen with regulation on privacy later this year or whatever, but I feel pretty safe saying that that is a great channel to focus on because you own it. Make sure you're doing it in a very personalized way. It's coming from a person and not your company, etc. And then just keep your social media channels nurtured and alive with content. You're in there, you're responding. If you belong to some Facebook groups, as I know a lot of people do in this community, go in and communicate in the groups. Bring value, like other people's content, share other people's content. Take time out of your day to really start engaging and building trust and two-way connection with your audience. And I personally think that knowing where your audience is going to enable you to be nimble in how you turn your business back on the right way when business is ready to be turned back on. So, and the last point I'll make is just making sure that you're offering a blend of physical and digital to your customers and your consumers. And that means what they see online is what they're going to see in a physical location and vice versa. So if you started as a physical location, do the best you can to emulate that on your website. This is a great time to merchandise or up-level your website and make sure everything is located in a central hub on that. All of your social media, your coronavirus policies, your online shopping, etc. And Ryan Atkinson's transcript and link to his podcast on Channel Mastery gives a lot of great detail on that. And so does his website. And if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, you should. He's got a lot of fantastic content multiple times a day. He does a great job there. So blending physical and digital in all channels is critical so that your consumer is seeing what they're going to see online when they come back and engage with you physically. And think about where their mindset was, how they engage with you physically, and what they're going to be seeing online today. They want to see people. That's how they're connected to you, and that's where the emotional connection comes from. And with that, I think I am all done with this webinar. So I hope that this served you. And again, we're going to be following up, sending a big list of resources, and we're going to be adding to this, just so you know. But everything that you see on this page will be included in what we send, plus more things that we mentioned. And I just want to say on behalf of my team at Verde and on behalf of the Channel Mastery podcast, we just couldn't be more proud to be supporting this incredible group of business owners. And we want to do everything that we can to support you at this time with what we think one of your most important controllable assets is, and that is your communications to your audiences. So thank you so much. And I also want to say Bicycle Retailer and Industry News is a co-producer of the Channel Mastery podcast, and we're just really, really proud to be able to work with them as well. And yeah, with that, I'm just really grateful that I was able to come here and do this webinar today. So thanks.
Thank you. We're really grateful that you were able to do this for us. I know we learned a lot. If everyone on the call wants more resources for COVID-19, go to nbda.com. We have a resource page that is updated multiple times a day. And we also have an events page where we have our webinars listed. So feel free to go there. And thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Kristin.
Thank you. It's been an honor.